and for people to join. So thank you all for joining us today. It's the second day of our Week of Wonder, session 3 of the day on tourism and events. So yes, thank you all for finding the room after your lunch break. Before we start, I just want to run through some housekeeping rules, and then I'll just briefly what this session is and what it's about, and then I'll hand over to our wonderful speakers. So when you're not speaking, can you please ensure that your camera and microphone are off and muted to avoid any background noise during the session? We will be recording this session to share with delegates afterwards, so please do keep this in mind if you are jumping in with any questions or posting anything in the chat, that it will be visible on that recording. The recordings will be made available, we're hoping, in about a fortnight. They need to go to our internal comms team to upload them onto the YouTube page because they don't trust me with the password. So it relies on feeding it into them. So if for any reason your internet or laptop connection fails, please note down the dial-in details. You can find those by clicking the 3 little dots along the bar with the leave button. Don't press the leave button, just 3 dots, and then meeting details, and the details are in there. And please do use the chat function. We want to hear your thoughts, your comments, any questions, feedback. We want it all, and we will respond to those as the session's going on. And if we've got time at the end, we can have a bit of a live Q&A. I just want to quickly plug our live briefing at 4 p.m. today. Many of you will have attended some of our COVID ones in the past. We are launching our new and improved Regulators TV this afternoon with HSE, DEFRA, and the FSA and OPSS coming along to update on some policy areas that will affect you. So the link's been posted in the chat by Daniel, but it is also in the documentation that you'll have received in your delegate pack. And I think that's all for housekeeping. So the purpose of this session is to just give you a bit of an overview of the work that we are doing to support tourism and events. It's an area, helps if I've got my notes in front of me instead of just trying to make it up as I go along. It's an area that we've supported for a number of years. I won't go too much into the events panel because Louise can do that much better than I can. But context for the tourism, our interest in tourism, Better Business for All and Primary Authority were referenced in the tourism sector deal in 2017, 18, 19, a year that Ross will and Vicky can correct me on when they're up. And as a result of that, we worked with Visit England, the Tourism Alliance, and various other hospitality organisations to look into the burdens that businesses in the tourism sector face in accessing regulatory advice. And that's kind of where our relationship with Visit England has grown from, a really strong relationship, and one I think regulators across the country are benefiting from, which is fantastic. There is a recovery plan that was published in, again, correct me if I'm wrong on the date, of 2019. And I think we're making good steps in with the recommendations in that, making sure that regulators are linked into that. I won't go into the details about that. There is a slide in the slide pack on that, and we're happy to answer any questions you've got. But that's kind of just the context. I'm not going to waffle on for any longer. I am just going to hand straight over to Vicky and Ross from Visit England, and then it will be straight over to Louise to talk about the events panel. So thank you. You're on mute, Vicky.
Oh, classic. Thanks very much, Nicole. My internet connection is a bit wobbly this afternoon, so whilst I'm presenting, I am actually going to take my video off. So apologies for that, but just make the audio a bit clearer, I think. My colleague Caroline is here with me as well. I'm going to do the bulk of the presenting, but we're both here if you'd like to ask us questions at the end. So just to introduce ourselves, and I work with Ross in the business support team of Visit England. And if I could just ask Caroline to flick onto the first of our slides, that would be great. So the reason we're chatting with you today, that we have been working particularly with Jackie Fitzsimons and her team at OPSS, and we identified collectively that the local authority regulators play a really important role in supporting tourism businesses. And we worked on adapting an existing roadshow programme that we had created to offer webinars specifically for regulators that looks at the local and national tourism landscape and key business support provided by both Visit England and also the local destination organisations. Could you forward me 2 slides? Perfect, thanks so much. So working with the OPSS team at Bays, we created partnerships with the local and regional contacts in a number of areas across England. We started with a pilot in Cumbria in June last year. We then took the learnings from that session, and we've since run 3 others in November and December last year. So we started with the Bath, Bristol and Wiltshire area in November, and then we did Hertfordshire and Lancashire in December. We also have another one scheduled for the D2 N2 LEP area, so that's Derbyshire and Nottinghamshire, and that is scheduled to take place next month on the 10th. So we invited regulators from all areas, so environmental health, fire and rescue, trading standards and licensing. And we also widened up the invitations to include economic development teams, Chamber of Commerce, LEPs and growth hubs, very similar to the audience for the Week of Wonder in actual fact. So next slide, please. So just to tell you a little bit about the content and how it helps regulators. So the idea was that obviously we wanted to share the resources that we have available to tourism businesses and to enable regulators to signpost to these resources. So it helps the regulators enhance the support that they can offer to tourism businesses and signpost to the very latest and most up-to-date information available to the industry. It also gives guidance, access to guidance and resources, especially at this really difficult time as the whole sector and the whole country goes through a period of recovery. It also helps regulators save time and money searching for those resources. We have created it, the webinar and the content into effectively a one-stop shop. And it helps the businesses that the regulators are in contact with to initially get, but also remain compliant as well. It also helps enhance those relationships with the businesses by adding value and building a more positive conversation, and also helps improve the commerciality rather than just the compliance of those businesses that you're chatting to as well. So next slide, please. So what does the webinars actually include? All of them followed a very similar format, but were very much tailored to the specific destination and the local organisations that were involved as partners. The sessions lasted about an hour and a half, and they were absolutely crammed full of content. So we really did squeeze as much into every session as we possibly could. And we also included a few little interactive elements as well for the regulators and the attendees to get involved with. And of course, as well as the opportunity throughout the session to ask questions of all of the speakers. So that's from the OPSS, from Better Business for All contacts, and also the local destination organisations as well. And on the slide here, you can see the sort of content that we had, ranging from all of our speakers, starting right from scratch, from what the tourism industry actually constitutes, who we are as an organisation, and also then similar sort of information about the destination management organisations as well. So next slide, please. So this is a slide about the feedback that we were able to glean from the sessions, and there's actually more than this, but I thought this just gives you a flavour really. So across the pilot in Cumbria and the other 3 road shows that we've presented, and obviously we've got one more to come, one scheduled in February, we've now presented to over 100 attendees live. And so in person, but also we recorded the sessions and made those available to colleagues to forward the recording to those that weren't able to attend the live session. And we know that in the region of about a further 20 recordings have been watched as well. So we were delighted to see a really good uplift in the knowledge base during the roadshow. So as you can see in the table on the slide, at the start of the session, this is the average across all of the sessions we delivered. Only 15% considered that they had excellent or pretty good knowledge at the start of the session, but by the end that had increased to 50%. So that was really pleasing to see that the content had really lifted the knowledge level. Also, what was rather nice was that on average across the sessions, 92% of the attendees said the session was useful or really useful. And over 85% said they were likely or very likely to signpost to Visit England resources in the future. So that's really positive for us that the regulators are picking up the opportunity to signpost to what we have on offer. We also reviewed the knowledge of 2 key guides used in our sector, which was particularly of interest to the team at OPSS. And it was useful to know that on average, across all of the sessions we'd held so far, only 19% of attendees were aware or very familiar with the Pink Book of legislation, which is produced by us at Visit England, with actually 41% of attendees never actually ever having heard of it. When you compare that to the Purple Guide of Health and Safety and Welfare created by the Events Industry Forum, 30% of attendees were aware or very familiar with that particular guide, with 30% having never heard of it. So that was really useful information, and we will carry on doing that kind of data capture with any future webinars we do, just so we can keep a track of that knowledge base. Next slide, please. So just to remind you that if you are based in the Derbyshire or Nottinghamshire area and you'd like to attend that February session that I mentioned, do get in touch. You can do that via the email on the slide at the moment. Invitations have already gone out from Caroline Clark at OPSS, but in case you've missed it, we're very happy to forward you the registration details. We are hoping to run more of the roadshows throughout this year, and if you would like to chat to us about scheduling one in your area, please do get in touch using this email address. Beyond the D2N2, we don't have any more scheduled, so we would like to chat to you about that if you think that would be of interest. So I hope that's given you a snapshot of what we've been doing on the webinars, and if you'd like to ask any questions, Ross and I are available, happy to answer any questions you might have.
Helps if I unmute myself. Thanks, Vicky. Thanks. So there's no questions in the chat at the moment, but I will just pause for 30 seconds. If anyone's got anything they'd like to ask, raise your hand, drop it in the chat. Caroline's put a camera on, which means she's got something to say.
Oh, you know me too well, Nicole. Just to say, Vicky, I've popped the link in the chat for the session in D2N2, Derbyshire and Nottinghamshire on the 10th of February, and you can register using that link. That is obviously for the D2N2 local enterprise partnership area, but Vicky and Ross, I'm not sure how you feel. I'd welcome other colleagues to join that and see if it's something that they want to explore in their own area. To join that session on the 10th. It's a 90-minute session, just to feedback and see if it's of value. I'm sure it is from the feedback from previous sessions to roll out in other regions. So it's not exclusive to D2N2. We welcome guests and observers to feedback into their own regions. Either drop me a line. I'm the East Midlands lead for OPSS, and I'll send you the link to register. And Vicky and Ross are collating all the responses and the attendees for that session. But as you can see, feedback's been really good. It's not exclusive to D2N2. Happy to let outsiders in to explore and see if you can feed back into your own region.
Yeah, I would just add to that that we're absolutely happy for people outside of the area to join. Just to caveat that obviously the information from the local destination organisations will be very specific. We've got speakers from marketing Peak District in Derbyshire and also marketing Nottinghamshire. So that information will be very locally specific, but apart from that, our national information obviously is relevant to anybody across England.
Thanks, Caroline. We have got one question from Susan from Durham. Does the Pink Book cover temporary structures like camping pods, semi-permanent tents, etc.?
It's actually our colleague who manages the Pink Book, and I was trying to see whether she's there to give me a quick response on that, and she isn't, unfortunately. I would imagine that it does cover off that. We work with an expert in the area to keep the content up to date, and I know that would have become particularly topical during COVID and restrictions. So I'd be surprised if we didn't cover that, Susan, but I can't guarantee it that right now.
I mean, and if it doesn't, and that's something that you think would be interesting in there, that can be fed back in. Many of you will know Kurt, and he was involved in the review of it. Was that last year? I don't really know what time scales we work on anymore because all time is just merged into one thing. But some of our local authority colleagues were involved in feeding back to Kurt on that. So I'm sure Ross wouldn't mind any other suggestions for it.
Yeah,
absolutely. We welcome as much feedback as possible from regulators, and actually at the end of each of the webinars that we've done, there is a big push to ask regulators to send comments through on the Pink Book to help us make sure it's across all of the legislation. There's not any disagreement with anything that we've covered in there. So thoughts very much welcome all the time from all regulators.
Great. Well, thank you. Thanks, Vicky. Thank you, Ross. So we'll move on now to Louise to talk about the events panel. But if you do think of any questions around tourism, feel free to drop them in the chat. And even after, we can feed them back to Ross and Vicky and get you an answer. So thank you. Over to you, Louise.
Yes, afternoon, everybody. And I share the IT woes today, having to reset my laptop at 2 minutes to 2 in getting rather nervous. I will share my screen. I have just so that you can see the terms of reference as I'm talking, to give you something to look at. So I'm Louise Watkinson. I'm Head of Public Protection at London Borough of Havering and have dealt with events of various sizes for about 10 years now as part of my portfolio. I'm just here today really to introduce the Local Regulators Events Expert Panel. It's a newly formed group. We've had a couple of meetings now, and it really is to bring together a national focus around events, but the industry that surrounds events as well. And obviously that links to matters such as tourism as well. And for a few reasons, I think this has come forward. I'm the newly formed chair. There's obviously economic recovery factor that's already been mentioned today. There's also a regional and national need, in my opinion, around engagement with the industry as a whole, and that links to something that's come out within what you know, the events in Manchester and the what's called the Martin's Law and the consultation that closed middle of last year, and has now been published around consistency for the industry, but also for people who are attending and going to these events, so that we can make sure that they are as safe as possible. So our first few meetings, the inconsistency of different approaches of local authorities and the difference in approaches and the challenges that face the businesses within this industry has been really quite dominant with the discussion that's happened. We've had extremely good engagement and attendance. So we've done some work around training for safety advisory groups across the country. And we have also engaged and had members of the Events Industry Forum to attend, and we've engaged with reviewing what is called the Purple Guide, so the guide for event organisers. And coming up, we're going to be looking in more detail at the fallout from the consultation around Martin's Law, and we also want to look at London Bridge around that, and really look at how we try and bring this together to get that consistency around that. So it is a partnership approach. It's local regulators and fire service regulators that are included. It's to really have that specialist and active role. There is lots of forums regionally, locally, that look at wider remits, but this is to have that specialist role for really getting into the challenges, you know, the provision of security staff and how they work, things like that, how it links with local resilience forums, community safety partnerships and things like that. And really, I think to meet the challenge as we recover and the industry recovers from the pandemic, and particularly the fact that we need to look more widely, not just because of COVID, but also because of risks of terrorism around the use of public spaces and public venues, as well as more traditional private events. So just to give you a scope of what we'll be looking at, and as I said, we are forming, so part of coming here today is really to engage, and we are as a group looking, you know, what is it that's needed from us, as well as what we can what we need from the industry or what we need from other partners. And we're doing a forward plan for the year to really get this off the ground so that we can focus and be adaptable to the needs that we may not yet know about. So it is about providing that technical, professional and moral support for one another. And that also what's been discussed is providing that support for maybe local authorities who don't have the larger regular events. So when they do get an application for one come in, you know, where do they go for that expert advice and support? So that we really want to do a forum of advice both for local authorities and licensing authorities, but also for the industry and event organisers, to really give that forum of what changes and updates to legislation and guidance can happen, how compliance can be attained, what solutions and application of controls can we help support regional answers to local issues, especially within the tough financial climate that we're probably facing for the next 5 to 10 years, again within the local authority sector and the industry themselves. And as I said, working with other topic groups and developing tools and resources, and we're already looking at developing templates around training for safety advisory groups as well. So that's probably all I had to say today. It was really just to introduce the group to a wider audience. We're trying to do this far and wide, and to really make it relevant to the needs of you know, tourism and events and event organisers in the industry. I don't know if there's any questions or anything, but that was it from me today.
Thanks, Louise. Again, I'll just pause for 30 seconds, give people, well, I say I'll pause, I'll carry on talking, but I'll give you 30 seconds, a minute, just to think of any questions you've got. So yes, the events panel's been in OPSSI's a huge success. It's a self-sufficient panel now, which is fantastic, and we would encourage local authorities that are interested in joining to do exactly that. So Mike Southcombe from York, Louise, has asked, how do people get involved and receive minutes?
Okay, if we haven't got somewhere where we publish at the moment. That is something that's on my radar, about that information sharing, how we, will we use some form of knowledge hub or something like that going down. So Mike, I would suggest contacting myself as the chair, and we can make sure as we're forming and our communications framework and plan as well, because also I'm mindful not to overlap with things that already exist as well, or whether we can piggyback things. So I would say I'm happy for my email address to be circulated, Nicole, and those of people who, well, I'll put it in here actually, and those people can let me know how they'd like to be involved and get briefings and updates from our discussions, and also with the templates and guides and things like that. So I'll put it in the chat anyway. That's the best thing. Thank you.
Thanks, Louise. And the point about receiving minutes, that is on something OPSS are thinking about in terms of all of the panels that we are involved in. How do we ensure that those minutes are reaching everybody and everyone is benefiting from the information that's coming out of those panels? So if you come up with a solution for that, Louise, we'd be really interested to hear how you managing that. But also,
yeah, you could hear the hesitancy. So it's good old-fashioned email at the moment.
Perfect, thank you. So I think there's no more questions in the chat, so might wrap up a bit early, give you all 15 minutes back of your day. So just to reiterate a few things, the Visit England webinars, we've got one planned for D2N2. If you're interested, contact me, contact local regulatory delivery inbox, Caroline, Ross and Vicky, I'm sure would be happy to hear from you. Any feedback on the Pink Book, again, send it our way. And we do have a tourism panel as well, that we've met twice now, and we do want to become a bit more consistent with that meeting and set the direction of that. So if there's anything in the tourism space that you are particularly interested in, I would be really keen to hear that and see how we could use the panel to further that. And the events panel, please do get in touch if you're interested in joining. So thank you all for taking some time this afternoon to come and hear about what we're doing in the tourism and events space. Just a reminder for the live briefing at 4 o'clock. If you're around, please do join. And we have our next and last Week of Wonder session of the day at 3 p.m. and that is on the hospitality strategy and how regulatory services can support that. So thank you all for joining, and enjoy the rest of your day.